because he's a queer.
Well, I liked him because he was a Jew, and I liked the fact he was a rebel.
Right.
I liked that. I didn't really think about the queer part, because, I mean, it didn't really penetrate me.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I mean, the main thing I liked about him was that he was a band, and he was crazy, but not that crazy. He was crazy a little bit like a fox. Like he went to the nut house before he wrote that piece called Howl. And the reason he went to the nut house was because there was a murder that he was suspected in. He was suspected in a murder,
Right.
and he went there to hide from the police, kind of.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I know, really. I know, I mean, he had a reason for going to the nut house because circumstantial evidence pointed towards him, and he didn't want to talk about it. And he figured if he went to the nut house, the police would leave him alone. He didn't want to talk about the whole thing. There was a fucked up murder, and it was all the people he knew, and he didn't want anything to do with explaining it to the police.
Did they solve the murder? Did they find out who did it?
I don't know. It was a famous case of the Beats in the early days. I don't think I'm not sure that Kerouac had any involvement in that, but Ginsberg was probably next. There were the three biggest Beats that I know of, which is not everybody. I mean, was Kerouac, Ginsberg, and then this creepy guy William Burroughs. William Burroughs was a heroin addict who shot his wife dead when he was trying to shoot an apple off her head, and he missed.
Wow.
So he went and started a drug colony in Morocco, which included Jews. That Shlomo later got off of drugs, and they became Orthodox Jews. It included Jews in Tangiers.
Tangiers.
And because he murdered his wife.
So he had to run away?
Very rich family. Burroughs, adding machine. It was, he was a very rich family. So it took years to get the thing fixed up, that he could come back. And he was a heroin addict, and he had drugs around him, and he set up a colony there, and he was able to write. And I didn't like his writings, but his writings were popular with that particular, some of the people who were into drugs and being alienated. What he said was more or less all the possessions in America are like drugs because they're all, they're all worthless.
Right.
Which to some extent is true. I mean, all these possessions and everything, the seeking of them was a little bit like heroin. His first book was written under a pseudonym, meaning not under his real name, called Junkie. And I actually read that before I knew who he was. It was a good book about a junkie. I knew several junkies. It was a good book about being a junkie where it kind of almost made you very sympathetic. You know what a junkie is? It's somebody who's shooting heroin all the time.
That's a junkie.
Yeah. That's what a junkie is. And so what he was saying is all the shit that people accumulate in America is junk also. That's what he was writing. And that in a poetic way.
It was a spirit. It's kind of like spiritual people liked it because it's
well, the
issuing material.
Drugs. The word for drugs in many languages like a spiritual word. The whole word for drugs is spiritual. You like
spirits.
Yeah.
Rabbi Kunin told me that it's spiritual.
Yeah. Black spirits, white spirits, whatever. Spirits, exactly. Spirits. It's spiritual. Drugs are kind of spiritual. Maybe not all drugs equally, but some drugs more.
Well, it was definitely religious back then because that's what they wanted. They wanted to see further.
Well, the 50s were very boring. Everything was good, and it was very boring. You had to have short hair. If you didn't have if you didn't have short hair and you were a guy, you had to know how to fight because they automatically thought you were a sissy or a queer. And so if you had long hair, you had to be able to fight. The first hippies had to be able to fight because they had long hair. But they had to be able to fight.
Wow.
Yeah, because they were doing something nonconformist.
Yeah, a bunch of angry Irish kids.
Some Chabad guys know how to fight. It's amazing. They're not all Chabad guys are like, couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. I mean, a lot of Chabad people can't, but some Chabad guys can fight. They're tough people.
Depends where they're from. Depends on their health. Depends on their training.
I mean, a lot of Hasidim can't fight at all. they're mentally deficient.
Everybody needs to know how to defend themselves and survive.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of Hasidim can fight, especially the ones that grew up in Brooklyn.
Like any group.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's the way life is. It's all like that. Life is like that. So, like a lot of these people are boring to me that he writes about. And the black guy I don't like, I met him, and I didn't like him at all. I disliked him because he hated white people and Jews, so I didn't like him. And some Jews like people like that. You always have fucking Jews who like anti-Semites. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Yeah. I did like Malcolm X, and he was something like an anti-Semite sometimes.
He wasn't Farrakhan.
No, I didn't like Farrakhan.
No, but Malcolm X wasn't Farrakhan.
No, Farrakhan and Malcolm X weren't even friendly. No. I liked Malcolm X, kind of, because Malcolm X expressed a rage against the American government. And I didn't like the American government that much either. When I went into the Army, I thought I was naive. I thought America was like God's right hand who had defeated Hitler and was like a righteous country. But I grew up in the Army in a way, and I thought the American government was just another government like capable of being Nazi-like too. Even though I wasn't in a war, I still understood that even the Israeli government can be Nazi-like. Of course it can. Police have a tendency to, if they're not closely watched, to become Nazis. Young policemen. Yeah. But, and who knows about, it's amazing with the Hasidim, they have, in Israel too, they have people going out picking up the body parts after the terrorism, and a lot of those people are Hasidim, aren't they?
Zaka mostly or Haredi Jews, yeah, picking up the...
Yeah, that's a gruesome job. That's really something. That's really something.
Yeah.
That's a horrible job.
Yeah.
And it's Haredi Jews who do it.
Yeah. Organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly from people.
Yeah. That's amazing because that's about as bad a job as imaginable, to do. Right?
Yeah.
Terrible.
It's horrific.
So there's a lot of people that are not in this book that were important, that became real people because there were Jews who were too far out for the book even, that were really far out, with LSD and everything, and some of them, because they made the connection somehow with becoming respectable because of necessity, because their parents got in trouble or something with the stock market, and they had to learn the stock. One guy, who's very interesting, he had to learn the stock market, and he couldn't do it, because he didn't have the ability. But he eventually became the head of the San Francisco Art Commission, which was being respectable. He became the voice, a narrator of almost every fucking television documentary about the 60s. His name, Peter Coyote. You ever heard of him? He does all the voices overs of the 60s. He changed his name to Peter Coyote. And he was further out than these people were. Most of them. He was really far out.
But he went,
Yeah, no, but he had to through necessity. His father was from somewhere like Uzbekistan, and when his father died, the whole family went to pieces because they didn't understand how the father arranged the finances, because he was all stock market, and he had to go back and help out, and he couldn't do a good job of it. He tried, but he learned to be respectable because he had to help the family. And eventually, he became respectable. He became the head of the art commission. That's a very respectable job. And then he became the voice in Hollywood of almost everything about the Vietnam War and the 60s. He became the voice, which is very respectable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he went from one extreme to a different extreme.
Yeah, he fixed himself up.
Yeah, he wrote in a book that he wrote that he ran into one of his beach buddies when he was with his Wall Street buddies. On Wall Street. And it was a little bit difficult for him.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, because he was dressed like Wall Street.
Exactly.
And the guy recognized him.
Yeah.